Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. This week we're going to get back to some basics and we're going to have a look at filtering. So, as stated, we're going to get into some basics now. I've just got a track here just to sort of show you, but what is filtering? So, I'm in Cubase, and in Cubase here, it refers to this section here as filters. It refers to them as a HC, which is a high cut, and LC is a low cut. Now, these are also referred to as a high cut is also referred to as a low pass filter, and an LC is referred to as a high pass filter. So if we turn one on, we can see here that as soon as I turn it on, it's set to 65 Hertz. It is filtering out all of this component here. So this is why it's referred to as a low cut, because it's cutting out all the low end, or a high pass filter where it's actually passing, allowing all of the high frequencies through. And then a high cut is obviously the opposite. So if I turn that on, again here, we are now cutting the high frequencies off. And if we refer to it as a low pass filter, it's because we're passing the low frequencies. Now, in each of these, so obviously we can adjust the frequency that it's being done, but we can also adjust the slope of the filter. So the lower the number, the wider the slope. And what that refers to here is you'll see, say this one here is 6 dB per octave. So per octave, it will reduce by 6 dB. So if we put that there, you'll see here the slope here. So where it gets to 6 dB here would be, in theory, an octave from where you're setting, okay? And then the steeper the slope, if we go to 48, obviously it's a lot sharper here, so we're cutting out a lot more. Wider slopes sound more natural, but obviously leave a lot of the lower frequencies in. The steeper the slope, the more of the frequencies you'll reduce, but it can sound a little bit unnatural and can have some funny effects on certain instruments if you do too sharp. Normally, most people usually sit with either 6, 12, or 24. 48 can be done, especially in things like EDM where there's a lot of synths and fake instruments and things like that, but it's not that common. So the purpose of using this is to, there's several reasons. One is to make sure that any frequencies that are above or below your instrument are filtered out. And this, what this does is if there's unnecessary frequencies or noise there, even stuff that you can't hear that might be, say, below 40 Hertz or 30 Hertz, this still takes up space in the actual mix, even though you can't hear it. And your hardware or your plugins and that are still reacting to these frequencies down here. So it's a good idea to clear them out. So I will use a low cut or a high pass filter on almost every instrument track. You know, even to a kick or a bass guitar, I would put it on there, but I would just get it down pretty low. So this just makes sure that, you know, if you do end up going somewhere like your mix gets played in a club or something where they've got massive subwoofers, that there's no unwanted rumble down there that you can't hear in your studio that will come out in there and will just make your mix sound horrible. Plus it just removes all this unwanted frequencies that aren't needed and then allows your mix to have a lot more sort of headroom and have all of this unwanted frequencies taking up all the space in your mix. So I find the best way to apply a filter like this is to play your track and start it down low and then bring it up to a point where you notice it cutting out frequencies. And as soon as I notice it starting to cut out, so if the track starts to sound a bit thinner, then what I will do is stop there and then I will just wind it back down a little bit until I hear that thinning disappear and the sound starts to thicken. And then I know that I've got it set to a right position where I'm not cutting out too much but I'm getting rid of all the stuff that I don't hear or don't need in there. And you can do the same effect on the top end as well, on the low pass filter or the high cut. You can use that exact same approach. Now, obviously, you might want to actually take it higher, because there might be a case where you want to fit an instrument into your mix. And, you know, let's say you've got an electric guitar, and that electric guitar also has a lot of bass in it, but you've got a track with a kick drum that's in the bass end, and you've got a bass guitar at the bass end. Having the guitar also sitting in that same space is going to create a very cluttered, messy, and boomy song. So what is quite common is to actually thin out the guitars and make a decision of what instruments are going to control what space in the frequency range. So you'll say the kick is going to sit and control, say, down to 60 hertz. Your bass, maybe you've decided, is going to sit in the space between 80 and 120. Now, this is obviously, these instruments are going to fill up a lot more space, but I'm just talking about their primary position. So if you've got your bass guitar taking up all of this space here, you might want to say, okay, well, I'm going to thin the electric guitars out so that they're not going into that space and masking or muddying up my bass guitar. It'll make your bass guitar clearer and your kick drum clearer, and your guitars will still sound good, because you won't notice that loss because the bass guitars are taking that place. Now, if there's a part in the song where the bass guitar disappears, suddenly your electric guitar may sound thin. And that might be a case of where you either duplicate the guitar and have different filter settings, or you automate the filter settings so that when the bass guitar disappears, you bring the filter setting back down on the guitar so the guitar sounds fatter in that section there. And the same thing applies with the top as well. You might have some instruments that just don't need the top end. You want to dull them down. It's quite a common technique to do on delays and reverb. So if you have a vocal track and you've applied a delay or a reverb in parallel, quite often you might darken that reverb or delay down by putting a low pass filter on here, bringing it down here. So it makes the delay or the reverb sound darker, so it doesn't clash with the vocal. The vocal sounds nice and crisp, clear, and the delay sinks back into the mix and hides a little bit because it's darker and it's not quite as bright as the vocals. So let's just have a bit of a play. Just listen to some tracks here and just do the settings. But it's a pretty obvious tool to use this. So this is a very low bass, this one. It's got a very low, lot of low end on it. So you could quite obviously hear there it would thin out a lot as I dragged it up. So if you found that you wanted to thin it out, that's what you would do. You'd bring it up. But you can also find the nice position where it's not thinning it out too much or not at all, but it's just making sure that there's no rumble down on the low end there. So what we can also do is find something maybe with some top end in it, not a kick drum, or a rim shot. So you'll see here I've got some filters already on this track, and you'll see I'm cutting out up to 160 hertz on this rim shot, and I'm also taking a little bit of the top end out because I didn't want it so high. So as this plays here, you can see all that frequency stuff down the bottom there, but it's primarily sitting up here in this space. So we can quite easily filter that bottom end there out. That's not really necessary, and that would have masked the kick and the bass and muddied it up a little bit. Now, in this case, I think I wound off a bit of top end because there's nothing really up there, and I just didn't want any sort of hiss or fizzle sort of sound up the top. But we could dull that down. So if we wanted to change the sound of the instrument, we can quite easily do that just with filters. And as I said, you could automate that in certain sections of your song to create a different effect for that instrument as you go. All right, so there's some basics on filtering. So hopefully you've got something out of that. Go away and have a bit of a play with some filters, see what you can do, and use them in your mix. I use filters extensively in my mixes, and that's one thing that I did that really did change the quality of my mixes. It made them sound less muddy, cleared everything up, gave me lots of headroom, and it just put things right in their space, and it gave me so much more control over the tracks. So go and have a play with the filters, get to know them, try them out, and make sure you use them in your mixes going forward. Hopefully that's helped. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.